Hi guys, it's Alex. I thought I'll do a live video because I don't have enough space on my phone and now I see the light. I thought I had it sorted, but it seems really bright all of a sudden. Anyway, I guess this will have to do. You can see me, you can hear me, so I think it's good enough. So I wanted to answer some questions and then also go deeper into what it really means to be on a healing journey, and what is the difference between healing on a treatment-based modality, on a treatment-based program, versus healing on a program that allows you to get to the root causes. So let me start with the Q&A. Somebody asked, what about salt? What about turmeric? I'm currently taking both, the person said, and is that okay? Look, salt is a stimulant, and it's also important to understand what we need to do to heal is different to what we may then in the long run be able to reincorporate occasionally. Okay, so that makes a difference. Okay, maybe this is a little bit better. Yeah. So the bottom line is salt is a stimulant, and it does stimulate the adrenals. And when you are healing, most of us, because of our adrenals are shot, and especially when we have autoimmune conditions, when we have chronic disease, our adrenals are shot for sure. So unless the adrenals are going to be healed, it means the endocrine system can't be healed, it means the thyroid can't be healed, it means the pituitary gland can't be healed. So at the end of the day, everything is always connected. And I still hear so many of you, saying, oh, but this is my issue, and that is my issue, and my condition. All of the conditions at the end of the day, as much as we like to think that our condition is special and our condition needs a certain intricate treatment that, I or somebody else still hasn't figured out, it's like, no, nobody is special. We all suffer from the same dis-ease. And at the bottom of every disease is acidosis, mucus, cellular dehydration, and which then leads to the breakdown of the nervous system. And depending on your particular makeup, you will have your dis-ease will be expressed in a different way in your body. So the one person will get cancer, the other person will have neurological issues, the other person will develop an autoimmune condition. And so we've got all these different labels and all these different fragmentations and again separations, but ultimately we all suffer from the same dis-ease. And that is what is so difficult. I know for me also it was like, but how is it possible? I mean, now I almost find it difficult to remember how I used to think about disease and nutrition and, all this separatism. Because now for me, it's such a clear understanding that there is no separation. It is all the same thing. It is, and if we break it down further, it is all emotional dis-ease that has become solidified in the body, okay? And I mean, I know that is even harder for people to understand. And for me also at the beginning, it was like, but come on, how could my emotional state be so solidified in the body? Anyway, I'll get into that just now. But the bottom line is salt is a stimulant and it will not allow you to heal your adrenals. At the same time, I am also still taking in some salt. And over the last year, I have radically reduced my salt intake. And some days I don't take any salt in, but sometimes I still need it, you know, and need it again from an emotional perspective and from just otherwise I can't be on a high fruit diet. And so it's you need to learn to know, okay, salt is not ideal, but I will be on a high fruit diet and then just use the salt when I really, really need it, with the awareness that it is something that I need to get away from, you know. So don't beat yourself up, and also please don't go radical or super strict. Learn to work with your body. It took me a year to get to this point where now most days I actually don't feel like I need salt. And every now and again, it's like, okay, no, today I need something salty, which can mean a salad or a raw nori wrap or something like that, you know. The first priority is always self-care and self-love, because, and I cannot stress that enough, the minute that you try to push through with your willpower, your body, you're actually abusing your body. And you need to work with your body. You need to work with loving the body through to your full healing. And again, this is such a different way of coming to oneness with your body. Because yes, I know, you know, initially I was also taking in salt for my adrenals, because that's what a lot of people, you know, or doctors would tell me. It's like, okay, you need to take some salt because that will help your adrenals. And I agree. Initially, my adrenals were so low that taking in some salt, or even putting in, I would put in salt in orange juice, and that would help me, you know. And it's a little bit like an antidepressant. When you are deep, 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 deep down in your depression, then yes, an antidepressant, which also, I mean, 25 years ago, whatever, I did take for 3 months. It helped me. It was like the lifeline. It was my rope that helped me to pull myself out of the depths of my darkness, you know. But once I had my head above water and I could see again and breathe again, I also realized, well, the antidepressant is a little bit like a fake glass dome on my being, and it's forcing a fake smile and a fake joy, but actually it put me in complete numbness with my body, you know. So I felt very robotical. I was like, yeah, I'm happy, but actually I'm not feeling anything. And that is when I realized this is not the way. I realized, okay, you have seen now that you can pull yourself out. Now learn to feel again, learn where was that numbness coming from. And that is how I worked myself out of a very severe depression. So it's the same thing with treatment-based thinking. You can treat something with salt, but ultimately you're not getting to the root cause. And we can, of course, live like that. You know, just as we can live as hugely obese people riddled with fungus and parasites, you know, you can live until 50, 60 years of age. You know, obviously what's the quality of life, but you can live like that. And you can live, you know, you can live with by treating your body constantly with functional medicine and all of that, but essentially you're not getting to the root cause, and you are never going to tap into the full power that you are, into the infinite power that you possess within you. And in some ways, you know, another analogy is like I used to do bodybuilding, again, 20 years ago, whenever it was. And I used to pump these muscles, you know, and obviously what do you do when you do bodybuilding? You go and you destroy your muscles in the gym. You break them down, you create an inflammatory response in the body, And then the body goes like, oh my goodness, I'm being beaten to a pulp. I need to go and repair myself and get stronger. And that is how the muscles build, right? But if you will, it is not a loving, it's not a loving practice. And so the strength that you gain by building your body through bodybuilding in some way is it's a somewhat fake exogenous strength. Whereas now, where I work my body with yoga and with using my own body weight, it's a completely different strength that I'm acquiring, and ultimately it's connecting me to my true power, to my endogenous strength. And so it's a whole different feeling. And we're working from the inside out versus from the inside in, from the outside in. So it's, and there's no right or wrong, it's all, how does your soul want to express itself in this lifetime? And eventually for me it was like, well, my ego wants to show itself because it wants to protect me from my vulnerability. And so the ego was building through muscle building and through treatment-based thinking. But ultimately it was actually a way of also building a very safe wall around who I really, really was and am in this world. And if this doesn't resonate with you, then this is not your path, Just as ultimately I had to realize, no matter how hard I'm trying to make the treatment-based thinking work for me, no matter how hard I'm trying to make functional medicine work for me, it actually doesn't resonate with my being. And I was doing that because I didn't want to be faced with the depth of my potential and with the depth with which I had covered and suppressed my potential. And I didn't want to deal with looking at all of that. But ultimately it was like, okay, but you're not truly living your truth. And that is killing you. That is taking away from you all the time. Because actually you are such a being of light and connection to source. And so ultimately I had to go, okay, I'm going to leave all of that, and I am at the cost of dying, because that is what it feels like in the moment that you let go, and in the moment that you completely surrender and trust into your love, your strength. I had to face the possibility of dying. I had to face my fear of dying and face everything that I wasn't facing. So that's really the two different approaches, and that is why I always talk about treatment-based thinking versus getting to the root cause and healing the body from the inside out. So long answer for salt, yes, until you need it, but have the awareness that you don't ultimately need it. You can still heal. I mean, I healed my body, to this where I feel amazing, but there's more. And so I'm letting go of salt more and more and more and more, so that the body can heal more and more and more. The same thing goes with turmeric. Turmeric is, as wonderful as it is, it's still a suppressant. And how do we know this? Is because when people take turmeric and many other things like this, unless you actually go and heal the body by taking away, stripping it down, and allowing the body to heal from the inside out through dry fasting, through the process of autophagy, and through deep, deep self-love, you're not going to be able to get, again, to the root cause. So turmeric, yes, it works, of course. It works 1,000,000 times better than, pain medication and anti-inflammatories. So by all means, if you've got, a sprained ankle, or if you've thrown your back out, then take turmeric, and it will help. But ultimately, what will truly help you is when you dry fast your way through the issue. The turmeric is just sort of a momentary plaster. And that's why a lot of people, they go and they take turmeric and they drink their turmeric lattes or whatever it is. But when they stop taking the turmeric, they find themselves back in the same boat that they were before. And that's because, well, they haven't resolved the core issue. And it's like this with a lot of even natural remedies. So just because it's natural doesn't mean it treats the root cause. You're still just treating your symptoms. And as much as it's better to use natural things to treat your symptoms, you need to get to the root cause. And I really feel that that is where we have lost our way. I was actually just reading a couple months ago how, up until Hippocrates, obviously, and I think that was like whatever, 1800s or something. I'm really bad with dates. But up until Hippocrates, medicine was combined with spirituality and astrology, and that's why typically your doctor was your priest as well, and the astrologer. And so there was this understanding that spirituality and your physical being is one and the same. There is no separateness, and that's why I always kind of smile within when people say, "Oh, I'm not spiritual." It's like, well, before we are anything, before we are physical form, we are spiritual beings, And we've made oftentimes this thing of being spiritual woo-woo. And we've given it a lot of labels, but ultimately we can all have, and we've all at some point, mostly as children, we've had the experience of being absolutely everything, of being limitless, of being pure potentiality and power. And that is because we all know that is what we ultimately are. But then we constrict ourselves through societal conditioning and through, just the various exposure of reality. We restrict ourselves to just the physical. But when we think about it, we only are 30% of pure physicality, because the rest of our body, 70% of our body, is water, but it's not water that comes out from the tap. It's liquid, it's plasmatic form. So what we are, 70% of us, is actually not even solid. And as we know, that which is solid in us is what's the hardest to change. And so before we go and change the solid, our solidity, our solidified form, we need to go and change our energetics, because everything that is energy within us, everything that is our thought, our thinking, our feeling, eventually solidifies into our physicality. And that is why when we work on detoxification, we go and we work, more than anything else, we work on our emotional body. I see some of you are on. If you have any questions, please ask. Okay, let me just get to the question. So fats during fruit fast or during the, are fats okay during the September fast? Again, fats are stimulating and fats are dense, so they tend to form a capsule around, or a buffer around our toxins. And if we want to get rid of our toxins, the less fats we have, I don't know if that's better, the less fats we have, the better, the more our body can flush out. So keep that in mind. And if you have a little bit here and there because you're still transitioning from an animal product diet, then by all means the fats will help you with the transitioning process. But it's just like the salt. Keep in the back of your mind, without pushing the body, keep in the back of your mind that you need to slowly decrease the fats. And some days you'll be able to go completely without fats, and other days your body will just demand. And that's where, in my experience and in my opinion, go with what the body wants so that you can then experience. So like sometimes, you know, I have craving and I have not a full avo, but, you know, like a half avo or whatever. And then I experience, and then I feel, okay, well, how did this work in my body? And sometimes the body is like completely at peace. There's no real bad consequence. And then it feels like, okay, the body needed a little bit of that buffer so that it can continue its detoxification process. Other times, I can feel how that half avo created mucus in my body, and it's like, actually, you didn't really need that avo. You just sort of wanted the emotional comfort, and it's like, okay, no beating up, no real big harm done. It's like we've learned the lesson, and that is the refinement process. And that is why also this process of detoxification is so hard for people, because there is no hard and fast rule other than constantly check in with yourself that you are coming with full love for yourself, but also have the understanding of what the different foods do to your body. So fats, as much as we continuously hear, you know, about the good fats, but they don't allow you to deeply detox the body. And at the same time, sometimes we, you know, go and push detoxification onto ourselves because we feel ready, and so we go, detox. And then the body goes like, okay, wait a moment, I need a break. And it's, you know, obviously it's the body and the emotional body. And so sometimes I'll have like a week where I'll have slightly higher fats, but where I'm also aware we'll rather take a break by having a little bit more fat than going and having, I don't know, a burger, a pizza, or, you know, something like that. So I eat the higher fats with the awareness that I am slowing down detoxification, that I am taking one step back. But that's also totally fine, because in this process, oftentimes it is 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. And to not make that wrong, but to simply, you know, have that awareness that it's a dance. It's really the most complex dance, because it teaches you to really take full responsibility for your healing, for your emotions, and even full responsibility for your momentary blockages or for your momentary unwillingness to go further. Like, you know, after my second fast, can't remember when, but at some point I hit this moment of going like, no, right now I feel like I've done so much work, I've pushed forward, I have been so brave, I have handled all of these healing crises by myself, and now, you know, and whatever that was, yes, that was a moment of regression. Now I need to just go to a coffee shop. I need to, for a moment, I know I'm pretending, but I need to pretend that I am the way I used to be. And so I went to a coffee shop, and obviously my husband happily came with me. And, you know, whatever, we had like an almond cappuccino, and we had, God forbid, an almond croissant. And I thoroughly enjoyed it, with full awareness that, yes, what I'm doing right now is not really supporting my healing process, but my emotional, you know, whatever it is, the inner child, the part of me that was rebelling in that moment, needed it as like, okay, just a moment. And yet it's not like I was fooling myself thinking that I'm doing something good. I was aware of all the implications, but I still enjoyed it. I still enjoyed the fact that, yes, I was taking 3 steps back, and then it allowed me to move forward with new kind of power, with new, okay, I can do that and it won't kill me, and now I can move forward again. And ultimately those moments of tracking back become less and less in my experience, you know. Like, you know, then there was a period where maybe once a month we would go for a gluten-free vegan pizza. And so I was like really, really good for the month. And then like that was my treat with full awareness that of course it's not a treat, it's just an imaginary treat, but we're human, you know. And now I'm not even, you know, and all of a sudden that kind of, oh, my monthly gluten-free vegan pizza, it fell away. Like my consciousness wasn't even looking for that anymore. And now every now and again, you know, whatever, when the kids go like, it's like, I'll rather make it here so that we don't have to go out, and, you know, I can make it mucusless and so forth. So all these movements are part of the healing journey, and it's good to honor them. Alison says, others answered my question yesterday, but I'm curious what you choose to use to clean your fruits and vegetables before you eat them. I must say, I'm not terribly worried about that, because I feel like, because we're constantly in cleaning mode, you know, and the reality is we will never be living in a pristine body, and we also don't need to. So I don't tend to overly obsess. At the same time, I do try and buy organic when possible, not always possible. I bless my food, and I choose to clean it in bicarb or sometimes some lemon. So that's kind of, but yeah, I mean, there's times when, you know, I buy tomatoes and, you know, I eat them out of the punnet and I don't wash them. And yet it has allowed me to get to this stage. So I don't think, you know, it's again, it's let's not worry deeply about those details. The biggest thing to get right is deep, deep self-love. And since we're talking about this, just yesterday, you know, I had a friend client that came and told me how she was just diagnosed with a disease, but, you know, and she was aware that this diagnosis was coming, but that she realized she wasn't able, or she wouldn't have been able to take action sooner in the proper way, because she didn't love herself enough. So she said, well, actually, I'm glad that I only got the diagnosis now, because now, through working with me, she has been able to tap into such deep, deep self-love and completely let go of all fear, and to realize it's all in her hands. She is able to completely heal herself by taking the correct action of self-love, which is fasting, fruit fasting, master fasting. Had she had this diagnosis a year ago, she would have gone the medical route, because she didn't have enough self-love and belief in herself to actually go through with the fasting. And I see this repeatedly, you know, unless you have enough self-love to really deeply love yourself through this process. And loving doesn't mean being strict. It means honoring your process. It means catching your bullshit stories. It means being aware of, oh, am I pumping weights on my healing journey because I still need to look good? I still can't accept that while I'm healing and while my body is stripping down and rebuilding itself, or releasing toxins into the system, my lymphatic system may be a little bit puffy, and I may not look as good as I want to. Can I accept that? Do I have enough self-love to not feel like I need to look good for somebody else, because I inside know the process that I'm undergoing? And in many ways, I can so relate to this, because I was there also, you know, especially having been in the nutritional and healing and spa and wellness industry, was like always this pressure to look my best. But ultimately, because otherwise people can't believe that, you know, what I'm doing is good, and all the bullshit stories that we tell ourselves. But ultimately I realized, you know, especially looking back at some of the pictures, I realized that when I looked my best is actually when I felt my worst, you know, ironically. And that was in my 20s when I was pumping iron, and I looked really, really amazing looking back. But I was riddled with depression. I was suffering from bulimia. And I certainly wasn't eating nearly, I mean, I thought I was eating clean, but I wasn't eating nearly as clean as I eat now. But beyond the eating, my emotional state, you know, now I have no fear running through my body. Now I'm constantly filled with such deep self-love and love connection to source that I feel there is no desire for anything. There is no need to be anything but love, you know. But I didn't have that then. And so I know that back then there was a lot of acidity running through my body. And yet, funny enough, I looked my best at the time. And then there were other times, kind of before my crash 4 years ago, I was doing, I'm sure you guys know it from the States, bar body, or, you know, like those bar ballet combinations with weights and whatever, like crazy exercise. And after a year of that, and by the way, most days that I would go and do these exercises for an hour and a half and literally kill myself, that's all I had energy for, you know. And I spoke to other women, sometimes outside the class, and they would say the same thing, like, oh my God, you know, it's such hardcore exercise and that's all I have energy for, and then I come home and I crash. And that's what I would do, you know. And yet I looked great, I looked amazing. I had, you know, the ballet legs, and I was developing the nice ballet arms. But eventually I had to honor the fact that even though I looked so good, my body was completely crashing. I had zero energy, I had brain fog, everything was just kind of coming down on me. And it was so terrifying to let go of those classes, because it was like, well, if I let go of that, my body is just, you know, gonna balloon. And then what? And eventually it was like, well, are you gonna continue killing yourself and look good while doing it? Or are you going to allow your body to heal the way that it needs to heal, but then through that process be able to fully reclaim yourself? And ultimately, I mean, my hand was forced, and I didn't even really have a choice. You know, of course we always have choice, but letting go of that was such a big deal. And when I look now, what I'm doing now is I do an hour and a half of yoga most days, but I do it with such deep love and deep self-care, and I didn't get there from one day to the next. I started with 5 minutes, and even 5 minutes when I started were really hard on my body. And I had to face just how much damage I had done to my body, how much self-loathing I had beat into my body, and that was stuck on a cellular level. And it's radical because most people will never realize that, you know. And so it made me, even now when I look at beautiful bodies, it makes me look at these bodies in a very different way, because you can't believe the smoke and mirrors, you know. And at the same time, the one thing that does not lie is the light in your eyes, and it's your energy that never lies. And you cannot fake a connection to source, and you cannot fake a deep connection to your innate power and to your purpose. And what always fascinates me, that inevitably happens, and it's actually blowing my mind, because I thought maybe it only happens with some people, but what inevitably happens to everybody when they go through this deep detoxification process, they inevitably tap into the true power of their being. And by doing that, it creates a revolution in their whole lives, really. And, you know, I'm just seeing now, I've taken 5 people through this process for 28 days. And we have talked very little about food, and we've talked really all about emotions. And to see how radically these people have shifted, and all the areas of life that it has affected, in all the areas that have been affected. And so I had a chat to one girl the other day, and she said, you know, I realized through this process how limitless I am, what an incredibly powerful being I am when I let go of all the things that stand in between me and source. And inevitably what happens is they we get to connect to our true purpose. And we get to see how many things we have substituted to, to make us feel good. And we can believe it for years, and some of us will never realize how many substitutions we have taken on. But when we let go of all of that, and initially that is the hardest part, and I always say, you become the creator of your own avatar through the system, because you strip your body down and you rebuild it from scratch. So before I get lost, let me just see. Okay, water fasting versus dry fasting, somebody asked. Dry fasting is definitely hugely superior. And of course, water fasting, you can do water fasting, but in my experience, dry fasting is, and not just in my experience, actually there are scientific studies around that. Dry fasting is 3 times more powerful than water fasting. So 1 day of dry fasting is equivalent to 3 days of water fasting. And the first reason is because when you dry fast, your body goes much quicker into deep autophagy. And that means when we dry fast, whereas normally the body is, the skin is open, the other way around. When we don't dry fast, the skin acts as a repellent, right? And when we dry fast, the skin opens up and it attracts moisture through the skin to feed the body, to feed the cells. But other than that, it also starts incinerating the diseased and weak cells for fuel, or rather for water, so that, because that is what the primary need of the body, right? We don't need food nearly as much as we need water. So in the dry fasting process, we force the body to become an incinerator of the bad and weakened and diseased cells for metabolic water. And the metabolic water that is produced during this process of autophagy, which is all scientifically proven, you can go and look it up and Google autophagy, that is really when the body starts producing this metabolic water. And the metabolic water that is produced in this incineration process is the finest water, the most deeply hydrating water for our cells. And just to remind you, disease, aging is all connected to cellular dehydration. So at the core, when we leave out the various labels and the various ways that disease and aging shows itself in the body, strip it all down, it comes down to, on a cellular level, it's the interstitial water that starts to dissipate. And that is why deep cellular dehydration shows itself as aging, shows itself as disease. And then obviously on top of that, we have acidosis in the body, we have mucus in the body, and that all ultimately leads to cellular dehydration. Whereas when we hydrate on a cellular level, that is when we start to heal. And then when on top of that, we give the body the environment, the perfect environment to heal itself, to rebuild itself, it will do that. So in treatment-based thinking, which is, that is what we all know about and we've all bought into so deeply, it is part of our cellular being. For most of us, it's a constant visit to the doctor, some more than and some less. And if it's not the doctors, then, we've bought into the belief that we need functional medicine or we need naturopathy or all of that and supplements. But it's always the mentality of needing something from the outside, that we are not enough, that we don't have enough power, enough innate abilities to heal ourselves, because that's like such a radical concept. But also that not only are we not enough, we constantly need to take, to use, to consume, to add. And if you think about it, that is really, it's again so ingrained in society. This constant needing to consume. Whereas what we're doing in cellular detoxification, we are actually stripping away, taking away, and allowing the body to get to a state where, like when you're in dry fasting mode, that is what one of my teachers calls nature's operating table, because you're getting rid of everything that stands in the way between you and your body healing itself. So you're leaving out food, you're leaving out water, and you're allowing the body to come to deep rest and to go, okay, what am I dealing with? Here's diseased cells, here's stuff that I don't need. Let me incinerate that so that I can start operating again from an optimum level. And if you look at what happens in nature when animals get injured in the wildlife, they typically will lie down in the grass. And like if an antelope gets injured by a lion and happens to not be killed, then or by other animals, then the antelope will lie on the ground. It will not drink, it will not eat for as long as it takes for the body to repair itself. Now, the other interesting thing that I would like to add here is, and there's videos again that you can watch about this. The other thing that happens when an antelope or an animal gets a traumatic experience, like it gets attacked by an animal or by a human or whatever, what happens? It lies down, or sometimes it happens in standing, and it will start to shake. And you can watch videos of this. It starts shaking for maybe 2, 3, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And then it stands up and off it goes. It jumps again joyfully into nature. So what happens there? What happens there is that any little trauma that gets inflicted on us translates into energy. And when that energy, because we are human, because we are not animals and don't operate simply on instinct, but we are ruled by the mind, right? We have made the mind and the ego our master, instead of being deeply connected to our heart and our true nature. And so we will take trauma on and we will rationalize it. This wasn't so bad. Yeah, maybe this hurt me, but I can deal with it. I'm fine, And so there's all these rationalizations that happen, or sometimes because circumstances don't allow us to deal with the trauma, as often happens in childhood, and so this trauma gets stuck in the body. But the energy is still there on a cellular level. It becomes part of the fabric of our being. And that eventually, again, causes dis-ease, because it's an energy that is sucking from us. It's creating a blockage that doesn't allow us to live in the fullness of our connection to source. Again, it doesn't allow us to live in our true freedom. And so the animals are really clever, and when they experience trauma, they start shaking, and they literally shake the trauma out. Whereas what do? We suppress it. And how often have you maybe, you've had a traumatic experience, like let's say something like an accident, where typically there isn't, the cognitive mind that says, oh, you shouldn't be traumatized by this. There's no judgment around. It's like, no, this is legit. I have had a traumatic experience. And so when that happens, typically we start feeling cold, we start shivering, right? And that is the body going into automatically releasing the traumatic experience. But with other traumatic experiences, we don't do that. And so a really important practice in our healing journey is to learn to just shake trauma out of the body. And you can look up TRE. It's very simple to learn to do at home. And essentially it's nothing else but allowing the body to go and shake. And initially it's very hard because we are so entrained to hold ourselves and to not show our emotions in our physical expression. But for me now, you know, when I started, I would start shaking at every little opportunity. And there were times where my cognitive mind would go like, okay, you can't shake right now, you know, you need to, because other people will see, what will they think? Now I'm at the stage where I don't care, and if I need to, I'll just lie down, or I'll simply, you know, go into the shaking and allow the shaking to go through the body. But it's not a shaking that is willful. It's almost like a kundalini moving through the body and pushing energy out, because again, ultimately everything is just energy. So yeah, water fasting versus dry fasting far superior. The other thing that I want to add here is water fasting keeps your kidneys busy with a job that it's not originally meant to do. So all this water drinking that we've been entrained to do keeps kidneys busy with filtering water instead of keeping the kidneys filtering lymphatic waste. And that is why we see most people have huge issues in their lymphatic system. So there's a lot of water retention, and it's one way us women in particular will show lymphatic backup and the water, I mean the body holding onto water, because it acts as a buffer to the acids in the body. Whereas other people, which are the ones that we then think are lucky because they tend to be all, you know, very thin and wiry, but they just have sort of the flip side of this lymphatic congestion. They show the acidity in a different way, but actually it's the flip coin of the same issue. So ultimately, to heal, you want to get lymphatic fluid out of the system, and that's why you need to not drink water, but rather get hydration through dry fasting and through eating high water content fruit and vegetables, and really keeping your water intake to a minimum. And I always say, you know, I haven't had really water since last year, September, and I get all my hydration from fruit and vegetables. And at the end of the day, I don't even eat huge quantities of it. And my body has become really, really efficient at utilizing nutrients, which translates into a low metabolism, which my whole life I've tried to get a high metabolism. But the irony is that you want a slow metabolism, because when you have a slow metabolism, you actually age slower. Your whole system, you don't want a high metabolism, you want a slow metabolism, because that is when you become actually a really efficient utilizer of nutrients. During fractions long dry fasting, what would be the gap between each cycle? Okay, so between each cycle of dry fasting, I mean, typically, you know, we do like 24 hours per week, once 24 hours. But if you want to go longer cycles, so if you do like 3 days of dry fasting or 5 days of dry fasting, which is, by the way, something that you need to slowly build up to, don't just jump into it. Even though it's completely safe to dry fast up to 5 days, you do it slowly and gradually as your physical body and your mental body and your emotional body is ready for it. So yeah, let's say you do 3 days of dry fasting, then you need at least 3 days, or ideally even 6 days, they say double the time, to basically rehydrate the body. And to rebuild, you only really need fruits. Vegetables are the builders, you know, and things like sprouts are the rebuilders. But like that is where then it really depends, where is your emotional body at, you know, because to handle a high fruit diet, you actually need to develop your emotional and mental body to hold so much energy. And I'll get into that another time, because that's a whole other discussion. And your body has to become a willing participant for your soul to collaborate with it, you know. And that's why I'll just quickly say this: on this path of detoxification, on this path of pretty much becoming, you know, not only a raw foodist, but really becoming a high fruit living on high fruit diet, you inevitably tap into the possibility of being a breatharian, and you inevitably tap again into your limitless power that is within you. But for most people, that is such, dare I say it, it's such a mind fuck, because we have all been so indoctrinated in needing to take things in from the outside, that the concept that we actually don't need nearly as much as we think we do, and that we can get to the stage where we actually need nothing. And so that is such a huge concept. I mean, I always laugh at, the one time I went to a party on day 30 of my master fast, and I was feeling amazing energy. And at this party, somebody introduced me to this girl and said, oh, this is Alex, and, she hasn't been eating for 30 days, and, look at her, and don't you want to know what she's doing? And this girl she had obviously had a couple of drinks, and she took one look at me, and she's like, no, I can't handle that. And off she went, And I found that so funny, but also so telling, because the reality is most people, it's like, no, I can't. And that was really her unconscious speaking, because she was tipsy. It was her unconscious said, no, I mean, that is just too much information. I cannot even begin to contemplate that. Or when I would walk around, after 48 hours, I mean, the maximum that I ever went so far without water was 54 hours. And even then I was walking around, I was actually quite fine. I had moments of weakness, but ultimately I was fine. And I actually had beautiful, strong energy flowing through me. And people don't get it. They go, how is that possible? And so it's almost too much for the brain to contemplate, because if that is true, then it means I need to look at so many other aspects of my life that I have taken as true and bought into that actually aren't. And that is why I always say this is the fastest way to awakening, enlightenment, and the fastest way to truly tap into your highest potential. If you go through with this, you cannot but end up on the other side as a fully sovereign, empowered being on all levels. You cannot reach the other side and be in full healing and still have areas in your life where you are playing small, where you are fine with things that actually do not fully support your full soul growth. And I'm still digging up little pieces of, oh, look, you forgot this little thing here, And so it literally, that's why I always say it leaves no stone unturned. Trauma also gets stuck in the amygdala, yes, which is where the fight and flight response is triggered from the fear center of the brain. It's part of the limbic system, right? So that is what I was referring to. Exactly, it gets stored there, it gets stored in our cells, and that is why releasing it through shaking is really one of the better ways. Okay, thanks, Colleen, for that. What else? Okay, so then somebody asked, Master Fast, is that the superior way of healing the body? Ultimately, in my experience, yes. It is sort of, dry fasting is the best way of healing the body. Master Fast system is really a glorified dry fasting system, because it keeps you in a loop of daily dry fasting for 18 hours. And then the juice that you have and the tinctures, that all just kind of aids the toxins being pulled out and being flushed out. And again, it forces you to deal with all the emotional stuff that you haven't been dealing with. So that is what makes it so powerful. It always comes down to the emotional healing. Because if you you know, you can do everything right. And I've seen that repeatedly. You know, I've seen people go through the system and do everything right, whether they're on a fruit diet or whether they're on the Master Fast diet. But if they do not deal, and if they're not willing to deal with the depths of the emotional stuff that comes up. So for example, let's say you're in a relationship that doesn't suit or doesn't feed your highest self. And you're in a relationship that you've made fine. Then the healing process will inevitably force you to look at that. And the thing is, oftentimes, and that has been my experience as well, you know, we don't dare to look at our shadow stuff. We don't dare look at the stuff that is actually hindering us, that is bothering us, that is hurting us, because we fear, especially in a relationship, that if we voice this, then what if the relationship will break apart? And especially in relationships that are fine, you know, like for me and my husband, I mean, we've always had a beautiful relationship, but we also, I always say, we've had at least 7 marriages. You know, we have repeatedly allowed our one marriage to die because it no longer served a purpose the way that we had it set up. And with each growth spurt, his and mine, we needed to readdress certain things. I needed to say, well, I now need to be fully seen and supported in this way. And each time that we voice that, there is the, oh shit, what if he doesn't meet me there? And then it's so easy to say, especially when things are fine and beautiful, it's so easy to say, you know, things are already going so well, and compared to others, I am further and better off, so let me just not say anything. Let's not go to the next level. But by doing that, you cannot heal fully, because once your soul knows what is possible, and once your soul knows what is the next step, then you need to honor that, you know. So it's really as simple as that. Infrared sauna, you know, I'm kind of 2 ways about it. I personally don't use the infrared sauna. I have used a dry sauna, and you know, Dr. Morse and many others are very much against infrared sauna. Feel into it. Obviously, there's also, you need to look at what is the EMF output. And I know that, you know, there's a lot of controversy there. Sometimes, you know, they claim it's a certain level, but then actually it's much higher. So I would be careful with that. And I don't think it's strictly needed. The basics to begin the fast, I highly suggest you read over and over the Master Fast protocol, because it's really good to get familiar with that. Everything is there. How to replenish vitamins and minerals. So there again, you know, that's again treatment-based thinking. We don't need nearly as much as we think we do. When I think about the huge amounts of food that I used to eat, all healthy, supplements and superfoods and all of that, and yet I wasn't healing, you know, and I mean, I was taking shitloads. You do not want to know the kind of money that I spent on food and supplements and functional medicine and, you know, all of that. But I wasn't getting anywhere. And then funny enough, by leaving it all out, by taking absolutely nothing, and by dry fasting and fruit fasting, I've healed my body to this level where I oftentimes feel like, okay, I mean, I could stop here, but no, I know there's more. So I'll strip down further and I'll rebuild again and again and again. So yeah, we don't really need any supplements. We don't need to take vitamins. Your first focus is to strip the body down, and then the body, only once the body is clean and you know, clean to the point where, first of all, you truly absorb everything that you're eating, then only will the body be able to speak to you, and it will tell you. And that is where, you know, I have days where I really crave a huge salad, And interesting enough, they are also getting less and less and less those days. So initially I craved a lot of greens, a lot of sprouts. I had my weeks where like I was growing sprouts like crazy and eating lots and lots of that. And now I have a whole tray of sprouts growing and I'm thinking, ooh, I don't even feel like it, you know? And obviously sprouts are full of minerals, but the body will tell you. So honor your body at all times and you will not go wrong. The other thing that I want to point out is do not take isolates, because isolates mess up the fine balance in the body and we don't need it, you know. And on the other hand, trust your body to tell you with such precision what it needs when you are in tune with it. It's just that then there again, our fear comes in. What if I'm not listening? What if I'm not hearing? What if I am not in tune enough? And that is where, well, trust yourself to know. You know, don't trust outside sources. You know. Calcium water, seawater. I mean, I've heard a lot about calcium water. I really haven't looked into it because I feel like I get everything I need from my fruits and vegetables. So I can't really comment on that. Baking soda and vodka. Yes, that's the combination, baking soda and vodka, which is the body scrub. And that's definitely, I will do a post on that because it's very, very helpful to do that for the skin, to clean the skin deeply. And just in closing, I again want to stress that focus on whatever you need to do to find deep, deep self-love. And watch for your triggers, watch for your blind spots, watch all the little ways that you claim to love yourself, but where you are actually in subtle ways telling yourself, I'm not enough. And, you know, there is always time to make this body more beautiful, to make this body into the shape that you want it to be. But healing is a process of being utterly present with where your body wants to be right now, even if that means having a few kilos more, or being puffier than you would like, or being less toned than you would like. The importance is stay with the feeling in your heart, stay with constantly checking in with yourself, and that the process of being aware of your patterns is much more important than truly getting it right on, you know, how much food you eat and which food you eat. Like I always say, if you know, like for me, even right now, I completely know that even though I'm eating way less than I used to, I still eat more than my body truly needs. I mean, ultimately, most days I realize one bowl of fruit is actually all my body truly needs. But at the same time, my emotional body is not yet ready to let go of another bowl of fruit and sometimes a salad or whatever it will be. And there's no need to beat myself up for that. You know, it's the point is, I mean, I am progressing and I have the awareness that the second bowl of fruit or the additional salad that I have is simply for emotional satisfaction, you know. And sometimes it's because my husband comes home late and then he wants to eat something and I want to keep him company. Some days I don't, and some days I do. So, and it's okay, you know, the body can handle that. It doesn't really affect us in any bad way. And yet I find it's important to cultivate that awareness, because that is what ultimately allows for transformation from a love, from a point of view of, I want to experience myself. What happens when I don't indulge in that extra food, you know? And so for me, I always bring it back to how can I love myself better? And sometimes loving myself better and more means giving in to the urge of being normal and going to a coffee shop and having that almond cappuccino or whatever it is. And other times it's loving myself means saying no to that. you know. So it's only you know. And that's why when people, you know, are too focused on posting how much they eat and, you know, oh, I've been good. I don't know. Have you been good? Because sometimes being good means being bad, you know, and honoring that right now I have this little step back, this setback, because maybe I need to regress into a particular addiction. Or like, for example, my husband now, you know, he is indulging in his almond cappuccinos, you know, and he knows very well that the coffee isn't serving him. He knows, even he goes, every time it's like, oh, funny, I don't enjoy it as deeply as I used to. And yet he still does it, you know. But each time there is that awareness. And I say, well, eventually you will grow enough self-love and enough self-wonderment to let it go. And so those are the subtle ways that they seem silly to many, but those are the important ways that we cultivate awareness, and that ultimately, it may take longer, but ultimately that is how we get to full healing. For example, when I started on this journey, I kept saying to myself and to sort of, you know, my friends that are with me in this, I say, you know what, I will never be a fruitarian. I love my salads and I love having my fermented vegetables and, you know, whatever, my raw sushis and all of that. And I was really attached to that. And I kept wanting to make a statement, you know, like the rebellious side in me was saying, I will not be only fruit, because that is not what I enjoy. But I didn't know better, because that is where my consciousness was at, and that is where my rebelliousness was at. And now, without trying, because I didn't try, I didn't force myself to eat more fruit, I didn't force myself to some days have only fruit. It simply arose out of an honoring of the body, by feeling into the body and going like, well, okay, what do I really want? What does my body really want? And then often going like, well, yes, I feel like a salad because there's an attachment to the salt, but actually I don't need it. I want more fruit. My body is really happy with more fruit. And so that was a progressive learning. And initially you have the awareness, and the awareness is what leads you. And then eventually the awareness becomes your new reality. So now most days I do eat mostly fruit without the awareness, oh, I'm being so good eating mostly fruit. Like that's not even there anymore, you know? And again, this is the process of becoming completely self-aware, completely self-empowered, and of realizing, wow, we are infinite beings of light. And of cultivating the awareness, where am I not being true to myself, true to the true arising in my body and in my consciousness and in my emotional self and in my mental self and so forth. So that is why I find the system so incredibly powerful. And I realize more and more that what we together are creating really is a movement towards not even awakening. This is a movement towards enlightenment. And again, enlightenment is a process of destroying everything that is not true, everything that is not real. And it will look differently for everybody, you know? And that's what I find so beautiful in this process. And my wish for all of you is to realize that you are infinitely powerful and infinitely connected to source, whether you like it or not. It's just becoming aware of the fact that you are, and being willing to have that experience. Because as long as you are pushing it away, as long as your body is not a willing participant to this deep connection to source, you will be fighting it. But once you become an open participant, a willing participant, And I always say, don't take it from me. Don't believe my experience, because my experience is just my experience. And I can also only give you that. But what I want for you, or what I would like to point you towards, is have your experience in this. But at the same time, take my word that you are powerful beyond anything that you can possibly imagine. And it also realizing this power is really only the beginning of this journey. You know, the end is not healing. The end is not becoming everything. The end is not having everything that we want. The end is not being utterly fulfilled. That is the beginning. Because when we are completely filled with such deep love for ourselves, for life, and gratitude for our infinite power and for this experience that we call life, that is where our true life begins. Because that is when we find our purpose and start bringing this purpose out in this overflow, continuously overflowing out into the universe, you know. And that is our purpose. And at that point, we reach complete desirelessness. There is nothing. Like, I always think, I want nothing. I want nothing but this, being this and sharing this, because that is when I feel mostly alive. So I thank you for giving me this time, and I will learn to keep it more contained, but oftentimes it's like it's just spewing out of me. So thank you for joining me and for being part of this group, because ultimately you are also beckoning this out of me, you know. So we are together co-creating this that we are co-creating. And the more you feedback and the more you ask, the more beauty and healing we can create. So I leave you with all my love and wishing you a wonderful day, and we'll talk soon. Bye. Ooh, where do I switch off?